the first time Pastor James saw her. She was standing in the rain outside the Piggly Wiggly, her grocery bags split open and cans rolling into the parking lot. He pulled his old truck over without thinking, jumped out, and started chasing down her tomato soup and green beans. She laughed when he slipped on a can of corn, and that laugh did something to his chest he hadn't felt in 15 years. "Thank you kindly," she said, pushing wet hair from her face. "I'm Sarah. Just moved here last week." "James," he said, then added what he always added. "I'm the pastor at Grace Community Church." He always said it right away, like a warning label, like a fence around himself. She smiled at him with eyes the color of honey, and he felt that fence wobble just a little. James had been the pastor of Grace Community for 12 years. He knew every person in town, baptized their babies, married their children, buried their dead. His wife, Mary, had passed when he was 32, leaving him with a 6-year-old daughter named Emma and a hole in his heart he'd filled with service to God and his congregation. Now Emma was 21, away at nursing school in Mobile, and James lived alone in the small parsonage behind the church. His life was simple, predictable, and safe. He liked it that way, or he thought he did, until Sarah Monroe walked into his church that following Sunday. She sat in the back pew, same honey-colored eyes watching him preach about loving your neighbor. After the service, the church ladies swarmed her like bees to honey. Within 10 minutes, James learned she was a widow, no children, worked as a freelance artist painting landscapes, and had moved from Atlanta to find peace after her husband died 2 years ago. "You'll love it here," Sister Betty told her, patting her hand. "We take care of our own." James shook her hand at the door, felt that spark again, and told himself it was just Christian fellowship. He told himself that lie for 3 whole weeks. The problem started when Sarah began volunteering at the church. She offered to paint a mural in the children's Sunday school room, and the church board jumped at the chance. James found himself stopping by to check on her progress, bringing her sweet tea, talking about everything and nothing. She told him about her late husband, Michael, who'd had a heart attack at 45 while jogging. "One minute he was here, next minute gone," she said, her paintbrush still against the wall. "I'm still angry at him for leaving me. Is that terrible?" "It's human," James said. "God can handle your anger." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and he saw something in her eyes that made him take a step back. "You understand loss," she said. It wasn't a question. "My wife, Mary, cancer, 15 years ago. Does it ever stop hurting?" "No," he said honestly. "But the hurt changes, becomes something you can carry." That's when it started, really started. Not with touching or kissing or anything improper, but with understanding, with seeing each other's scars and not looking away. The town noticed, of course. Small towns always notice. "Pastor James Shore is spending a lot of time at the church these days," Sister Betty mentioned to Deacon Frank over Wednesday night supper. "That Sarah woman is always there too," Frank's wife added, her eyebrows raised like quotation marks around an unspoken accusation. James knew they were talking. He told himself there was nothing to talk about. He was just being friendly to a new church member. That's what pastors do. But late at night, lying in his empty bed, he knew he was lying to himself. He started dreaming about Sarah. Dreams where she wasn't a church member and he wasn't a pastor. Dreams where they were just two broken people putting each other back together. He'd wake up feeling guilty and pray for forgiveness. But the dreams kept coming. Then came the church picnic in May. The whole congregation gathered at Miller's Lake for food and fellowship. James was manning the grill, flipping burgers and hot dogs, when he heard Sarah's laugh from the volleyball game. He looked up and there she was, her sundress swirling around her knees, face flushed with joy, looking more alive than he'd ever seen her. She caught him staring and smiled, and in that moment, standing there with his spatula in his hand and the smell of charcoal in the air, James realized he was in love with her. The burger he was flipping fell into the coals. "You all right, Pastor?" young Tommy asked, handing him another patty. "Fine," James lied. "Just distracted." But he wasn't fine. He was falling apart inside, his carefully constructed life cracking like an egg. After the picnic, James avoided Sarah. He stopped checking on the mural, stopped bringing her tea. When she called to ask if she'd done something wrong, he said he'd just been busy, and the hurt in her voice nearly killed him. "I miss our talks." The church elders noticed his distraction. "Your sermons have been off lately?" Deacon Frank said after a board meeting in June. "Everything okay?" "Just tired," James said. "Maybe you need a vacation. Get away for a while." But James knew a vacation wouldn't help. You can't run from what's inside you. Then Sarah's car broke down. It was a Tuesday evening, and she called the church because she didn't know who else to call. James drove out to the highway where she was stranded, hood up, emergency flashers blinking. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said. "AAA said it'll be 2 hours. "No bother," he said, though being alone with her felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. They sat in his truck waiting for the tow truck, the sun setting orange and pink across the Alabama sky, and talked about everything except what they both were feeling. She told him about a painting she was working on, a landscape of the church at dawn. He told her about Emma's new boyfriend, how nervous he made him. "You're a good father," Sarah said. "I try." "You're a good man, James." The way she said his name again, soft and full of meaning, made him turn to look at her. And there, in the fading light, he saw his own longing reflected back at him. "Sarah," he whispered, and it sounded like a prayer and a confession all at once. She reached out and touched his hand on the steering wheel. Just touched it, nothing more, but it felt like the world was ending and beginning at the same time. "I know," she said. "I know we can't, but I needed you to know that I..." "Don't," he said, pulling his hand away like she'd burned him. "Please don't say it." "Why not? It's true." "Because once it's said, we can't take it back." The tow truck arrived then, saving them from themselves. But that night, James lay awake knowing everything had changed. The unspoken thing between them had almost become spoken, and that made it real in a way it hadn't been before. He prayed for guidance, for strength, for God to take these feelings away. But God was silent, or James wasn't listening. Maybe both. The next Sunday, Sister Betty cornered him after church. "Pastor, folks are talking," she said, her voice low and serious. "About what?" "About you and that Sarah woman. About how much time you spend together. About how you look at each other." James felt his face go hot. "There's nothing inappropriate." "I didn't say there was," Betty interrupted. "But appearances matter, especially for a pastor. You need to be careful. Your reputation is the church's reputation." She was right, of course. In a small town, a pastor's life wasn't his own. He belonged to the congregation, to the community, to expectations he'd accepted when he took the pulpit. That afternoon, James did what he should have done weeks ago. He went to Sarah's house, a little cottage she rented on Maple Street, and told her they needed to talk. She made coffee, and they sat on her porch swing, the chains creaking in the summer heat. "The church is talking," he said. "I know. Sister Betty called me yesterday. Suggested I might be happier at the Baptist church across town." James felt anger rise in his chest. "She had no right, because I'm afraid if I say it, I'll act on it. And if I act on it, I'll lose everything. My ministry, my calling, the respect of my congregation. Everything I've built my life on." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thick with tears. "I understand. I'll start going to the Baptist church. I'll stay away from you. It'll be easier that way." "Sarah." "No, you're right. This is impossible." She stood up from the swing. "I should have never moved here. I should have never walked into your church. I'm sorry, James. I'm so sorry." She went inside and closed the door, and James sat there on her porch swing, feeling like he'd just cut out his own heart. For 2 weeks, he didn't see her. She kept her word and stayed away. The church ladies stopped their whispers. Deacon Frank said his sermons were better. Everything went back to normal, except James was miserable. He moved through his days like a ghost, performing his pastoral duties with mechanical efficiency. He visited the sick, counseled the troubled, preached on Sundays. but inside he was hollow. Emma called from nursing school and knew something was wrong immediately. "Dad, you sound terrible. Are you sick?" "No, honey. Just tired." "You're lying. I can always tell when you're lying." "What's going on?" He almost told her. Almost confessed everything to his daughter. But what would he say? That he'd fallen in love with a woman and was too scared to do anything about it? "Just missing you," he said instead. "I'll be home next month. We'll talk then. Okay?" After he hung up, James walked over to the church and sat in the empty sanctuary. The afternoon sun streamed through the stained glass windows, painting the pews in colored light. This had been his refuge for 12 years. His purpose, his life, but lately it felt like a prison. "What do you want from me?" he asked God out loud. "I've given you everything. My life, my work, my grief. Is it wrong to want something for myself? Is it wrong to want to be happy?" The sanctuary was silent except for the hum of the air conditioner. James put his head in his hands and cried for the first time since Mary died. That's when he heard the door open behind him. He turned, wiping his eyes, and there was Sarah standing in the doorway, backlit by the afternoon sun like an angel. "I forgot my painting supplies," she said. "They're still in the Sunday school room. I came to get them." "Oh, okay." She didn't move. Neither did he. "Why are you crying?" she asked. "I'm not. You're a pastor, James, not a liar." He almost laughed at that. "I'm crying because I'm a coward. Because I'm afraid to reach for what I want. Because I'm 47 years old and I've forgotten. Because I'm a pastor. Because the church is watching. Because if we're together, they'll force me out. And if I'm not a pastor, then who am I?" "You're James," she said simply. "You're a good man with a good heart who deserves to be happy. Why isn't that enough?" "Because I made promises. To God, to this church, to my calling." "Did those promises include being alone for the rest of your life?" "No, but did those promises include never loving again? Never allowing yourself joy or companionship or partnership?" "It's not that simple." "It is that simple," Sarah said, her voice rising. "You're making it complicated because you're scared. I'm scared too, James. I'm terrified. But I'm more scared of living the rest of my life wondering what if. What if we'd been brave enough to try?" She was close to him now, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something floral and sweet, close enough to touch. "The church won't accept it," he said weakly. "Some won't, some will. And the ones who truly love you will want you to be happy." She reached up and touched his face. "When my husband died, I thought I'd never feel anything again. Then I met you, and suddenly I was alive again. Don't you see? God didn't bring us together to torture us. He brought us together to heal each other." James wanted to believe her. God, how he wanted to believe her. "If we do this," he said slowly, "if we try, I could lose everything. Or you could gain everything," Sarah said. They stood there in the colored light of the stained glass, the whole future hanging in the balance, and James made his choice. He kissed her. It was soft and tentative at first, the kiss of two scared people reaching for each other across an impossible distance. Then it deepened, became something more, became a promise and a hope and a beginning all at once. When they finally pulled apart, both were crying. "What do we do now?" Sarah whispered. "I don't know," James admitted, "but we'll figure it out together." That night, James called an emergency meeting with the church elders. Deacon Frank, Sister Betty, Brother Tom, and 3 others gathered in the conference room, their faces curious and concerned. "I want to be honest with you," James began, his hands shaking. "I've developed feelings for Sarah Monroe, strong feelings, and I believe she has feelings for me too." The room went silent. Sister Betty's mouth fell open. Deacon Frank leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "We haven't done anything inappropriate," James continued quickly. "We've been careful about that. But I can't keep lying to myself or to you. Care about her. I love her, actually, and I want to pursue a relationship with her. But I want your blessing first." "Your blessing," Brother Tom said. Pastor, you don't need our blessing to date someone. I do though, because I'm not just anyone. I'm your pastor. And if you can't accept this, if you think it will harm the church, then I'll step down. The words cost him everything to say, but he meant them. The elders looked at each other, having whole conversations with their eyes. Finally, Sister Betty spoke. Pastor James, you've served this church faithfully for 12 years. You've loved us through our darkest times. You baptized my grandbabies, you buried my husband, you helped my daughter through her divorce. We love you, not just as our pastor, but as a man. Her eyes were wet with tears. And if you've found someone who makes you happy, someone who can walk beside you through this life, then we should be celebrating, not standing in your way. Betty's right, Deacon Frank added, his voice gruff. You've been alone too long. We all see it. If this Sarah woman is good to you, if she makes you smile again, then you have my support. One by one, the elders voiced their agreement. Not all of them were happy about it. Brother Tom had concerns about perception and propriety, but none of them wanted James to step down. Take it slow, Sister Betty advised. Let the congregation get used to the idea. Introduce her properly, not as just a church member but as someone special to you. Give folks time to adjust. James left that meeting feeling lighter than he had in months. He took their advice. He and Sarah started attending church functions together, sitting side by side, letting people see them as a couple. Some members were supportive, bringing Sarah casseroles and welcoming her into James's life. Others were less enthusiastic, whispering in corners and finding excuses to leave the room when they entered. But James discovered something important. He could live with their disapproval. What he couldn't live with was being without Sarah. They courted the old-fashioned way. Dinners at her house, walks around the lake, long conversations on her porch swing. They went slow, respecting both their positions and their pasts. They talked about their late spouses without guilt, honoring the love they'd had while making room for this new love growing between them. Emma came home from nursing school and met Sarah over Sunday lunch. So you're the reason Dad's been smiling again, Emma said, shaking Sarah's hand. I hope that's okay, Sarah said nervously. Are you kidding? It's wonderful. I've been worried about him for years. Emma hugged her father tight. I'm happy for you, Dad. Mom would be too. That made James cry again, but this time they were good tears. Not everyone was as accepting. A group of about 15 members, led by Mrs. Henderson who'd been at the church for 40 years, decided they couldn't worship under a pastor who was living in sin, even though James and Sarah weren't living together and weren't being inappropriate. They left Grace Community and joined the Baptist church across town. It hurt losing members. But James realized something. A church that couldn't accept love and grace and second chances wasn't living out the gospel anyway. The church grew stronger without them. New families started attending, drawn by James's honest preaching about love and loss and finding joy in unexpected places. The congregation grew younger, more diverse, more alive. 6 months after that first kiss in the sanctuary, James proposed to Sarah on the same porch swing where he'd almost walked away from her. I don't have much to offer, he said, holding out his grandmother's ring. A small salary, a parsonage house, a life spent serving others. But I can offer you my whole heart, if you'll have it. Yes, Sarah said, crying and laughing at the same time. Yes, yes, yes. They were married in Grace Community Church on a bright October morning, with Emma as maid of honor and Deacon Frank officiating since James obviously couldn't marry himself. The sanctuary was packed with people who loved them, who'd chosen to celebrate rather than judge, who understood that pastors are human too. As they said their vows, James looked out at the congregation. Some crying, some smiling, all witnessing this impossible thing made possible by grace. I, James, take you, Sarah, he said, his voice strong and clear. To be my wife, my partner, my love. I promise to wake up grateful every day that you walked into my life. I promise to paint beside you, pray beside you, grow old beside you. I promise to be not just your husband, but your biggest supporter, your safe place, your home. Sarah's vows were equally beautiful, and when they kissed, the congregation erupted in applause. At the reception in the church fellowship hall, Sister Betty pulled James aside. "You know what the best part is?" she said, her eyes twinkling. "Your sermons have gotten so much better. Turns out a happy pastor is a better pastor." James laughed. "I could have told you that." "No, you couldn't have. You had to learn it." She patted his cheek. "Love makes us better, Pastor. Love always makes us better." That night, James and Sarah drove to a bed and breakfast in the mountains for their honeymoon. As they sat on the balcony watching the sunset, Sarah leaned against his shoulder. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Losing those church members? The controversy?" "No," James said honestly. "I regret the years I spent being afraid. I regret almost missing this." He kissed the top of her head. "You were right back in the sanctuary that day. God brought us together to heal each other. And He did." "We healed each other," Sarah corrected. "Yes, we did." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from orange to purple. Back in town, Grace Community Church stood quiet in the night, its stained glass windows dark, waiting for Sunday morning when it would fill again with voices raised in praise. Waiting for Pastor James to stand in the pulpit, his wife Sarah in the front row, and preach about grace and second chances and the God who brings beauty from ashes. Because that's what had happened, really, from the ashes of 2 dead marriages, 2 broken hearts, 2 people just trying to survive their grief. God had brought something beautiful. Not despite their past pain, but because of it. Not avoiding their scars, but weaving them into something stronger. The church ladies would still gossip because that's what church ladies do. Some members would still disapprove because change is hard for some folks. But the majority would see what James and Sarah had become together. Stronger, fuller, more alive. And they would understand that love, real love, is always worth the risk. And on quiet Tuesday afternoons, when James would stop by Sarah's art studio behind the parsonage and find her covered in paint, lost in creating something beautiful, he would remember standing in that empty sanctuary, crying and alone, and he would thank God for the moment he chose courage over fear. Because in the end, that's what love requires. Not perfection. Not a life free from complications or judgment or risk. Just the simple, terrifying courage to reach for someone else's hand and say, "Let's try." James and Sarah tried. And it worked. Not perfectly, nothing ever is. They had hard days and disagreements and moments of doubt. Sarah sometimes missed her late husband, and James sometimes struggled with the weight of leading a church while navigating a new marriage. Emma had to adjust to having a stepmother, and Sarah had to. Outside, the Alabama evening settled over the small town like a blanket. Lightning bugs started their nightly dance. Somewhere a dog barked. Sister Betty's porch light came on across the street. Life went on, simple and complicated and beautiful all at once. And in the little parsonage behind Grace Community Church, Pastor James and his wife Sarah built a life together. Imperfect, unconventional, and absolutely worth every risk they'd taken to find each other. Because in the end, that's what this story is about. Not about rules or reputations or what people think. Not about being perfect or having all the answers or never making mistakes. It's about being brave enough to love when love seems impossible. About choosing joy over fear. About 2 broken people who found each other in a Piggly Wiggly parking lot and built something beautiful from all their broken pieces. It's about grace, real grace, messy grace, the kind that says you don't have to have it all figured out, you just have to be willing to try. And that's a story worth telling. The kind of story that gets passed down on southern front porches for generations, getting better with each telling, reminding us all that it's never too late to fall in love, even when you're the last person who thought it could happen to you. Especially then.